This has been kind of a heavy moment for me this past few days. How many of you guys go to Patriot Oaks? Okay, how many of you guys go to Fruit Cove? A few more. Swiss Point? Okay, LPA? Okay, then like other. So if you're like in Passetti Bay or something else, other. Okay. Has pretty much everybody heard about the events surrounding Tristan Bailey? Okay. So, did anybody go to the vigil on Monday night? The vigil was the candlelight ceremony that we did? Okay, so by an amazing act of God, that is kind of like one of those weird things where it's like this person knew this person who knew this person who knew me. And that's how I got there. Like it wasn't, like I didn't have a connection. I'm not like super close to anything. But all of a sudden, I'm there, and I'm kind of like somewhat heading up this vigil. Not really sure what I'm doing. You know, like it was really terrifying because I'm just like showing up with candles and a sound system. And like as I'm walking in, like all these different volunteers are like, "Oh, thank you so much for speaking tonight." Speaking? What am I speaking? And I was like, I was coming to pray. And they're like, "Yeah, that's good." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Like I was like, I can pray, like, but I don't know what to say. Anybody else? I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say or how to react. Yeah. Then yesterday I went to one of her cheerleading teams and did some counseling with them. Today I was at Patriot Oaks doing more counseling with them. And in prepping for tonight, this is now the second time that I've tried to preach Psalm 19, and I've canceled it. One time because I was sick and couldn't be here, so that was the night that Mr. Neal preached, like way back forever. And so I had to cancel that. And then here I am prepared to preach Psalm 19 again, which is the heavens declare the glory of the Lord. And I was really excited. It's like one of my favorite passages. And instead I was like, you know what, with all these conversations I've had with other students that don't belong to my youth group, I need to have this conversation with you guys, okay? Grieving is normal, okay? Now, this may not necessarily apply directly to you. You may be like, I'm not grieving at all through this. To me, this is like a weird situation. I get that. But your friends are probably dealing with it, okay? And it's normal. Matter of fact, if you don't grieve, that's not normal. Fighting the need to grieve, fighting the acts of grieving, that's not normal. And here's what I mean by that. Like, when girls get emotional, what do? Cry in groups. It's never like just one girl crying alone in the corner, is it? No, it's like in the front, in the middle, and they're all like holding each other and like, I'll cry with you. I don't even know why we're crying, right? And so they're just like crying, right? Meanwhile, if a dude cries, what happens? That's right. Like someone's like, are you crying? No. Not me. That was some other guy that you heard crying. Excuse me, I have to go somewhere, right? And they just kind of like dodge. And honestly, sometimes girls do that too. But girls, you tend to cry, but without knowing how to handle your emotion. Guys, you tend to turn towards anger. Because again, we're talking two secondary emotions here. Girls, this is kind of the cry emotion. Guys, you do the anger emotion. And it's always secondary. So like, for example, we're going to talk more about angry, but you can never just be like, I'm angry. Like what? You just like rolled out of bed today and be like, you know what? I feel like being angry. Angry today. I'm going to be angry Jason all day. Like no one says that, right? You are angry because. Does that make sense? So if any emotion can have the word because after it, okay, then it's a secondary emotion. So if you're like, I'm angry because someone embarrassed me at school. I'm angry because someone hurt me emotionally or physically. That's how that works. And when you grieve, you go through a process. And here's the interesting part. We want to think that like we're all unique And you are. God made each individual one of you special. And so, like, you are unique, but at the same time, we all go through a very similar process. And tonight I want to share a little bit with you the process, why it's significant, and how you can go through grieving in a healthy way. And if you have friends who are going through grieving processes, how you can grieve with them in a healthy way. Because grief should not be just one person all by themselves. God didn't design us that way. God put us in a community called the church. And can I just say, in every experience that I've had so far this past half week, I can tell who's grieving as a Christian and who's not. Christian grief is totally different than like non-Christian grief. I'm trying to do this without notes, and I'm also trying to decide how deep to go with you guys. There used to be a time and day in America where if the person died, they would say something like, well, he's in a better place now. Sometimes they'd even say something like, he's with Jesus. No matter how he acted, no matter how he lived, no matter really how he even believed, they'd be like, he's in a better place now. Is he? Is that person? That time's actually gone. Now there's just this great wonder because of the secularism in our culture. It means there is no God. Thank you for asking, whoever said that. So, secularism means no God. And if there is no God, then there is no heaven. If there is no heaven, there is no afterlife. There is nothing that comes next. It's just you're born, you die, and in the middle is it. And a lot of people have responded to that. This part's special for you guys. Two responses of that this life is either pointless is, okay, it's meaningless, I shouldn't bother, everything's just vain. And the other side is, well, if this is all I get, I'm just going to party until I'm done, because this is all I get. Meanwhile, we as Christians believe, no, this is not all there is. There's something else to come. Yes, the body is temporary, and we don't know when the end is for our bodies, or any body for that matter. But the soul endures. Why? Because we are made in the image of God. And God is made of forever. And part of the image of God that God put on us originally was we were all supposed to be forever. The only thing that endures now is the spirit. And if you are a Christian, then your spirit is even now resurrected and is enduring now. But this body, eventually we're all going to get old, all right? We're all going to end up ugly, bald, and fat, okay? Like every last one of you, okay? Ladies, you too, all right? All right, so like life happens, okay? So let me talk to you a little bit about grief and how to process it, because this is a normal part of life, okay? The first stage is what's called shock or denial, okay? Maybe it wasn't necessarily this stage, this particular situation for you, because you weren't super close. The closer you are to the immediate situation, the more the shock hits. And I've had a couple moments where it just like, wait, what? And shock kicked in. And the closer you are to the person, the longer the shock lasts. The longer the denial lasts. Almost like disbelief. And so do this. Go back to the moment when you found out what had happened. Maybe it was from a friend, maybe it was on social media, hopefully not. Maybe it was from your parents. And all of a sudden you just knew. And you're like, wait, no. And I've heard this out of students' mouths. That doesn't happen in Fruit Cove. That doesn't happen around here. We're like the safe community. That happens other places, but that doesn't happen here. Well, it does. It did. And so the harder the moment was, the more you want to spend time in that shock, in that disbelief, in that denial. But then that's actually really short-lived. As far as like the whole process is a very short-lived process, because you can't just stay in shock forever. You can't just hang out there forever. Your body eventually is like, I got to move on. So the next stage is the one that maybe some of you guys find yourself in. It's anger. You're angry because you can't do anything about it. You're angry maybe because your friend was taken from you. You're angry because someone hurt you or you lost something. And really that's what grief is. Grief is a sense of loss. So grief can come in a lot of different situations. Not just the loss of a life, but it can be loss of something. It can be the loss of a relationship. Person's still alive, but for whatever reason, you guys are no longer friends. It can be the loss of a spouse, maybe through divorce. It can be lost through like a parent or something like that because you went through, your family dealt with a divorce. It could be loss of a grandparent through death or anything like that. It could be loss of a group of friends because your parents moved you from one area to the other. Or for whatever reason, your friends changed. I mean, I know that never happens. Our friends are friends forever, right? And the same friends you had in first grade are going to be like with you when you're 90, right? No. I don't even keep up with anybody I graduated high school with. I'm trying to think of the last time I talked to somebody I graduated high school with. I can't even tell you. Nope, I can't. It was 5 years ago. And his name was Drew Lowry. That was the last time I talked to anybody. And I remember it was like totally random. I didn't like go looking for him. He didn't go looking for me. But like we're walking down, I was like, oh, it looks like Drew. And he's like, oh, it looks like Jason. And that's literally how we met. And we're like, and then we're like, all right, bye. And I haven't talked to him again in 5 years. Friends are friends forever. Right, okay, so you may be dealing with some sort of loss. So initially you go through denial, shock, and then you go to anger. Anger because you can't do anything about it. You can't fix it. You can't bring her back. You can't insert there. Now here's where a lot of people get stuck. Because there's a right way to handle this and there's a wrong way to handle this. Anger can give way to fear. Tap his shoulder. Anger can give way to bitterness. Then sit up. Sorry, I really hope that got caught on the mic. So, anger can give way to bitterness. Bitterness is something that will eat you alive from the inside. You can kind of tell who bitter people are. Just every time you bump into them, they just bristle. They're angry. They don't have joy. They're frustrated all the time. And listen, we all go through seasons, okay? Your life is not always going to be like green meadows everywhere you look and rainbows and unicorns, okay? Like, your life is going to have dark seasons, and so it's normal sometimes to be dealing with anger and bitterness, okay? But bitterness, if it's left unchecked, will begin to rot you out from the inside because bitterness, anger, those kind of sentiments are toxic. Maybe someone hurt you, I don't know your story. Maybe, honestly, you've not lived long enough for someone to hurt you that bad. That's totally viable at your age. But when you get to be my age, you've definitely run through some people who have hurt you. And when they hurt you and you begin to grieve the loss of that relationship, you begin to grieve the loss of what has happened, you then get angry at them. You're like, why did they have to do that? And you begin to search for answers. Why did it have to be like this? How could they do this to me? Why me? Why does it always seem to be me? You know what I found out after dealing with one of those seasons like that? I got answers. And guess what? The answers didn't matter. I didn't feel better because God gave me answers. I've had other seasons. I still don't have answers. I'll probably never have answers on this side of life, okay? But guess what? The answers never helped. If I asked why and all of a sudden God answered my why, I wasn't like, oh good, thanks. No, it was like, I still feel miserable, even though I know why, even though I got the answers. So instead of searching for answers when you're angry, search for connection. The presence of God is more powerful than the answers of God. There are a lot of moments that the only reason I made it through those moments is because of the presence of God. Knowing that He was there, but not just the presence of God, presence of others who care about you. You know, in addiction programs, they actually tell you that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. You think like, if I don't have to be a drunk anymore, that just means that I don't drink anymore. It means I'm sober. No, that's actually not true. The opposite of addiction is connection. Having meaningful relationships that keep you accountable. Because, I mean, otherwise, who cares? What's the purpose in it all anyways, if there's no one to live for? You got to process your anger the right way. And listen, in those moments, you may be shocked at how you feel. Like, you might be like, I'm thinking that thought. I feel like I shouldn't be thinking that thought right now. Like, I'm a bad person because I just thought about that. Have you had that moment yet in your life? Yeah. And you're like, I'm not a good person because I just thought that about him, right? Or maybe it's a cat and his cat got run over and you're like, right? And so, like, you're a terrible person now, right? Listen, if you're angry and you do not let your anger out, it can consume you. Now, here's a bonus tip for you guys that I can't give all to your non-Christian friends. Scripture says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Why? Because all anger needs is time to turn into bitterness. So that's why it says, don't even let the sun go down. So in other words, within the day, if someone hurts you, go directly to them and be like, hey, can we talk? And get the bitterness out. If you're dealing with grief, if you're feeling the loss, go directly to them. Don't be like, I'm going to post all about them on Snapchat and I'm going to like roast them. And don't do that. That's not helpful. Okay, that's not going to like reconcile you at all. And here's the thing, you're just not going to feel better. You're still going to be just as angry at them. They're still going to be just as angry at you. And you're not feeling better, but hey, you just blew them up. So now you're even worse. Instead, go to them directly. Okay? Go to people directly. Screens, texting, phone calls even, is not authentic connection. Face to face, where you can hear their voice, where you can see their facial expressions, where you can feel their empathy in the room. That is real connection. And I know you guys scared. You're scared about that kind of stuff because you don't get to do that anymore. All I got to do is like, which one do you feel more comfortable with? Phone call or text? All of you are like, text. I hate talking to people on the phone. It's intimidating, right? Why? It's because you're not used to genuine, authentic, real face-to-face communication. All right, so after anger comes, and I'm trying to jump into the next one. Oh, it's self-medication or bargaining. So it depends on your situation. So, for example, let's say grandma is sick in the hospital. You don't know what's going to happen. You begin to bargain with God. God, if you'll just do this, I'll be the best Christian ever. I will go to church all the time. I'm going to give all my money to the church. Like, I will go live in a hut in Africa. Like, you just start bargaining with God. If you'll do this, I'll do this. Jesus says this about bargaining. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Be careful of what you swear to the Lord. Be careful of what you vow before God. Don't bargain. Even though we're going to try and do that, don't do that. Instead, rest in the presence of God. The other thing you may do is self-medicate. So if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling hurt or something like that, you're going to do something so that you will not feel that anymore. So let me give you an example of what I do when I get angry. And it's a silly example, but it still explains who I am. Last season, the Rays were in the semifinals for the World Series. We got to the last game and we choked. And I was like, we lost, and I'm just like mad. I turned off the TV. I got up and I started like washing dishes. I know, crazy, washing dishes. Why? Because like when I feel like mad, I just get busy. I gotta go do something. I gotta work my anger out. Okay? Maybe you're the same way. Maybe like if you get angry, like dudes, you just gotta like, because punching people's wrong. Okay, so we decide to go do something else. Okay, maybe you want to go play golf. Maybe it's like I've got a batting cage out back. Maybe you've got a punching bag or something like that. Maybe your mom was like, just yell into the pillow, it'll be okay. Like whatever, but you've got to like do something about it. Okay, that's like somewhat a form of self-medicating. You get busy. You numb yourself. If you find yourself trying to numb so that you can't feel your feelings, that's when you're self-medicating. Maybe you begin pouring yourself into your relationships. Maybe you begin to pour yourself into how popular you are because you have this deep insecurity of, does someone actually care about me? I can't tell you how many times I've seen this where a student's, okay, I'm going to get real with you guys for a minute, so listen on this one, be adults here, okay? Parents get divorced. The daughter then begins to wonder, is it my fault? Does dad love me? Am I worthy of male affection? So then she starts finding boyfriends to find out. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that one played over and over and over. Or the opposite is, I hate all men, and I'm just going to stay away from all of them. We react to our lives and we self-medicate according to loss, according to grief. Instead, don't do that. Express your feelings to others. Be honest with others. Be genuine. Because in those moments of genuine connection, you can find freedom. Because literally what you're doing is you're taking toxins, these toxic feelings, and just getting them out, expressing them. Now, you don't want to necessarily do this to anybody and everybody. Can I just be like real for a second on that one? Like, you don't just need to be like, hey, you random person I just met on the road, can I tell you all my deepest, darkest secrets? No, one, they're going to be like creeped out. Okay, so don't do that, all right? Also, immature guys, this is not a great way to like pick up girls by expressing all your failures. So don't go for those like deep conversations either, okay? Like, just being honest, okay? Instead, find someone who you are willing to let you know you all the way. Like, this person can know you so much, they can know things about you that you don't know about you. So for me, I can remember there was a guy who told me that it's like, one day you're going to go into ministry. And here's the thing, God had already been working on my heart, but I hadn't told nobody. Because I didn't want to go into ministry. I wanted to do something else. And so when this guy's like, man, I think you're going to be a pastor one day. I'm like, shut up. Like, I don't want to do that. But how did he know that? Because he saw what God was doing in my life. And he saw things that no one else could see. Why? Because I'd let him in that far. You got to have those kind of people. All right, so that's stage 3. Stage 4 is depression. Depression kicks in when your anger runs out. You're done bargaining because you know there's nothing you can do to fix it. There's nothing you can do to make it better. And you just kind of feel stuck. Now listen, depression is a normal part of life. It's become a buzzword now in our culture, like, I'm dealing with depression. Oh, let's get you some help. Like, it may just be a season, okay? It may just be a part of life. Now, if you're like always depressed, like even when you're like doing the things that you love and you're just like, I haven't felt happy in months, okay, go find help, okay? Come see me, come see one of the leaders, come find help. But if you're just like, this terrible thing happened to me on Friday and it's Tuesday and I'm not happy, hey, guess what? That's normal, okay? All right, give it time. You're going to be feeling the sense of depression. Now, this is also another place where a lot of people get stuck. Because again, we don't want to feel our feelings. So we begin to numb ourselves, we begin to isolate ourselves, we begin to put it off, and then we go back into that denial stage kind of again. That's when we start saying things like if you hurt somebody and they're no longer your friend and then you're grieving the loss of that, this is when instead of being like, hey, it was my fault, you'd be like, well, it's their fault. You start passing blame off. And what you do is you stunt your emotional growth, you stunt your spiritual maturity. You're never going to become what God wants you to become because you're stuck in this phase. And it doesn't have to be about just because you lost a friend, you lost a loved one, and now they're no longer alive. Like, that is the obvious big grief. But there's all these little smaller griefs that can do the same thing to you. For some of you guys, you thought you were like the best athlete in the world until you went to like try out and didn't make the team. And all of a sudden, like, this perspective of grief just... Some of you girls, you thought you were like the most, beautiful girl in all the school, and the dude that you're like, he comes by and he asks some other girl to the dance, and you're just like, crushed, right? And eventually you're just dealing with this grief. It can be little things, but then they mark you, then they become part of your story, and then they define you sometimes for the rest of your life. The last and final stage is what's called acceptance. And a lot of people don't make it here. A lot of people, because they want to take control back of their life, they stay in dysfunctional. And those are all the previous 4 stages, right? The denial phase, like, that didn't happen. It's like, okay. Like, just dysfunction. Acceptance is when you finally said, yes, it did happen. If I did something wrong, I did something wrong. You're beginning to accept things for what they really are. You're beginning to embrace reality. In the case that we're dealing with now, it's she's gone and she's never coming back. And just think about that. She's your age. She's gone and she's never coming back. Guys, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. None of us. I want to stop here and talk about something really important. And please hear me in the right light. I feel almost crude to even bring this up in this context, but at the same time, I feel like I would be a terrible person if I didn't talk to you about it. It's called choices and consequences. Every choice has a consequence. Good choices have good consequences. You choose to do the right thing, and a lot of times you have a consequence that is a good result. If you choose to do the wrong thing, like sneaking out of your parents' house at night, I'm not saying that's what the consequence may be, but you don't know and she didn't know. And things, the Bible says, a way of a fool seems right in his mind. In the moment, you're like, come on, it's going to be fun. Everyone else is doing it. It's going to be great. Those choices will all have consequences in your life. Don't just blow past them. Don't just be like, that won't happen to me. Don't do that. The sooner that you can begin to think about the consequence before you make the choice, the better your life will be. And trust me, I get it. Like developmentally, I'm just letting you know it's working against you right now because your brain hasn't fully developed the opportunity to develop, to consider risk, okay? Especially dudes, for whatever reason. Like, we do dumber things longer than everybody else. And we're like, come on, it's going to be fun. And then we're like in the cast later, and we're like, I thought it would be fun, but now I can't move my leg, right? And so, like, we lack this ability. But if you can begin to think, that may not be the best decision, that's when you start making right decisions. Okay, so choices and consequences. In the acceptance phase, you begin to move on to what's called the new normal. Now, sometimes when you get hurt, you would get a wound, right? I'll give you a good example. I'm about to do a good middle school illustration right here. These 2 fingers right here have numbed feeling. Like, it's been a few years now, so I'm beginning to get feeling back. When I say a few years, like I was 16, okay? So it's been like 20 years, okay? Kinda. Like, this feels really good. This is kind of dulled. Why? Because a set of electric hedge trimmers almost cut them off. Yeah. Like literally electric hedge trimmers went like, and I was like, and then the scary part, here's the worst part. I just immediately did the smart thing, hold it over your heart and cut off and put on pressure to cut off circulation. Because that's what my brain is thinking. I was at least using my brain. But here's what happened. I did this. Oh. And so mom hears me scream. She comes out the door and all she sees is this. And my mom went and ran back inside. I'm like, still bleeding, like help, you know. All right, so I learned one in that moment. I'm not invincible, okay? But it eventually did heal. Eventually I lost some tissue, so they had to sew them like that. Okay, because I lost skin and tissue through the process, and so they're like that. But of course, I've got to stretch them out. So like then I'm in like physical therapy, and they're like stretching it out, and I'm like, I'm about to punch you, bro. Like it was hurting. Okay, but now I have full range of motion again. Okay, everything's great. Doesn't quite feel right. Okay, like one time I cut my finger on a razor knife, and I'm just like walking around job site. I'm like, someone's bleeding, and they're like, bro, look down. I'm like, oh, it's me. They're like, I had no idea. Okay, like consequences. Okay, but look, it's healed. But it bears a scar. Sometimes when you get hurt, maybe it's your parents hurt you. Maybe you don't even know your parents, but they hurt you. It's going to leave a scar if you heal. Some of you guys then will never go through the process to actually let God heal you. And so you're just going to be like an open wound or a scab. And all it takes is someone just to kind of brush up the wrong way, say the wrong thing, do something that's too close to that subject, and all of a sudden it's like you're wounded all over again. If you allow yourself to go through the phases, the emotions, to express these emotions, and to talk to other people about it, who give good, godly, wise counsel, and you seek after the Lord and His security, then you can actually heal over with a scar. And that's way better than staying wounded. Let me illustrate it this way. And I've been waiting for this one because I've not got to share this with anybody else. I'm just waiting for you guys. In heaven, do you know that Jesus has scars? Matter of fact, after Jesus' resurrection, Thomas, who was not there, no one believed. He didn't believe that Jesus was really alive. And so Thomas makes this really grandiose expression. Unless I put my fingers in the holes in his hands and then put my I'm like, Thomas, that's so weird. But that's what he's saying. He's like, it's hyperbole. It's just exaggerated. Unless I can put my hand in his side where they stabbed him with the spear, right? I'm not going to believe. And as soon as he finishes that, Jesus just appears in the room. He's like, hey, Thomas, what you doing? Can you imagine Thomas turning around? And then imagine Jesus walking up to him, grabbing his hand, come here, Thomas. Come here, just touch me. And he's like, no. No. Jesus calls him on it. And then before Jesus even gets to him, before he even touches Jesus, he just falls flat on his face and says, my Lord and my God. Jesus kept his scars for a reason. He could have gotten rid of the scars. All right, he's Jesus. If he didn't feel like having scars, he could have gotten rid of scars. He kept the scars as a reminder for us. He boasts in his scars. They're healed, I'm sure. I'm sure he's not bleeding everywhere up in heaven. Okay, they're healed, but they're scars. So that every time you see it when you're walking around in heaven, you're like, that's my scar. He did that for me. In the same way, if you allow God to put healing in your life and you go through the steps, and even Jesus who's up on the cross and says forgive them, God, because they don't even know what they're doing. If you've made it to the forgiveness phase in grief sometimes, and you've made it to the reconciliation phase where you're making friends with your enemies like Jesus did, then you get to that point where you get to boast in your scars. And you say, look at what the Lord has done in my life. This is my hope for all of you, that one day this will kick in, okay? If all of you are no one's ever hurt me that bad. Don't worry, it's coming. Life happens. It's going to happen. And I hope that you recall this moment. For others of you, maybe you've been hurt. I know, honestly, there's a lot to process in this life. Maybe your parents moved you and you didn't want to move. Maybe you had a friend who's super rude and now you lost that relationship. And it's not big grief, but it's still grief. Maybe you're adopted. I'm serious. One of the hardest things for a teenager is if they're adopted. I deal with some heavy counseling for teenagers who are adopted. Why? Because they're why do my parents not want me? My birth parents, why? And there's that grief that marks them for the rest of their life. But if you allow God to work in you, through you, to heal you, you can then one day boast in that scar of look at what the Lord has done and look at what the Lord has given me because of this. Guys, I just wanted to share these things with you because I don't want you to go through this life and not have heard those things. Because whenever I was telling these to students who are not Christians, they just stared back at me I have no idea what you're talking about. And I don't want that to be you. We're going to get ready to go to D groups a little early tonight. D group leaders will be excited about that. And so if for some reason you're I need to talk to somebody, we're going to be hanging out after D groups, okay? So after D groups are over about 7:30-ish, okay? I'm going to be in here. Maybe a couple of our leaders might stick around. Maybe you want to talk to your D group leader. That's a great thing to do. And just be I need to talk with somebody about some of the emotions I'm dealing with a hurt. Listen, that's great. If you're even bold enough to do it in your D group in front of your peers, which by the way is the best feeling when you do it in a group. Why? Because this is what happens. You're I'm angry because of this. And this is what you see. Everybody else is yeah, and you're like, oh, I'm not on an island by myself. Like other people feel like I feel. It can be very healing for you guys. So let me pray for us, and then I want you guys to head on into D groups. And again, I'm available if you guys need to talk.